Hey, Brian James here. Before we get to this conversation, I just want to take a minute to speak about the future of this project, Howl in the Wilderness, which has been ongoing for almost 6 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about for me. This thing started as a whim and it's grown into something that has been so incredibly rewarding to me. The conversations that I have on here have nourished me so much, as have the relationships that I've formed with people who listen to it. So I want to keep it going, but I've had some time to rethink about how I want to do that. And one of the things that we speak about quite a bit on this podcast is reawakening our aesthetic sensibility and paying attention to our aesthetic response to what we encounter in the world. And increasingly, I've been having this negative aesthetic response to all the advertisements that I see on YouTube and that I hear in the podcasts I listen to. And I got to pay attention to that. And if I'm going to be in integrity, I've got to respond in a way that's in alignment with my own aesthetic response. So what I've decided to do is to go back to the model I started with and to make this podcast completely listener supported and to refuse all advertisement. So you'll notice on this episode that there are no ads, and yet I'm giving you the full episode free of charge, really. And so that's me putting my faith in you as a listener or viewer who's getting some value from these conversations to respond in a way that feels in integrity for you. So if you want to support the podcast and you want to keep it going, I'm relying on your support, just to put it very clearly. So the best way and the most direct way to support the podcast is to become a member of the Howl in the Wilderness Patreon community, where you'll get access to early release of all episodes, bonus episodes, stuff that's not released to the public, as well as the opportunity to participate in the soul salons that I've been holding over there, where we get to have open and honest conversations about some of the topics that we cover on the podcast. And those range from everything from spiritual practice to psychedelics to depth psychology and putting some of the ideas that we discuss here into practice in the world, no matter what you do. And I got to tell you, some of the people that I've met there are the most interesting, thoughtful, creative, quirky people I've met. I mean, they're part of my pack. So that's probably the best way to do it. You could also leave a one-time donation at the PayPal address down in the description, and that's great. But really, the impetus behind this whole thing is about connecting with others. It's why I changed the name of the podcast to Howl in the Wilderness, because I've often felt quite alone, howling about the state of the world and what I want more of in the world, like more soul, more attention to aesthetics. And so moving forward, removing ads from the podcast is one action that I'm taking in response to my own aesthetic response to what I'm seeing out there. So no more ugly ads interrupting these beautiful conversations. And if you want to support that, then please follow the links below. Find a way to support the podcast in any way that you can. Just know that it's much appreciated, and I think going to a good cause. So thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate it. And thanks again to all my Patreon subscribers who have been supporting this podcast over the past few years. It means more to me than I can really express here. So that's where I'm at, and that's how I'm going to move forward. Thanks for listening. Now, on to the conversation. Ipek Burnett, thanks so much for joining me once again on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me again. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yes, me too. You recently, in an article that you published about Allen Ginsberg's Howl and its relevance to what's happening in the political, cultural climate in the United States right now, specifically, you alluded to a book that you've been working on, and the title immediately grabbed me: Art as Activism, right in my wheelhouse. So you're kind enough to come on the podcast to have a preliminary talk about it, and we won't go into too much detail about it, but let's begin by just speaking about what inspired you to take up this project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can talk a little bit about that article you mentioned too, because Allen Ginsberg's poem America really helped us reconnect and start this conversation. So the book, it's called The Art of Activism, and it's going to be hopefully out in 2027. I'm deep in it as we speak, work in progress, and it's really giving me a lot of, it's really helping me gain strength and resilience during a time when it seems quite bleak out there in the world. So I'm, on a personal level, very grateful to this project. The seed for this book, the seed idea from this book, came from James Hillman. I'm always very inspired by him, and I had read about this idea of psychic numbing, the way he described it, perhaps 20 years ago, and I keep revisiting it again and again. And psychic numbing originally was coined by Robert J. Lifton, an American psychiatrist who sadly passed away just a few months ago in the fall. He worked with trying to understand the psychological causes of political violence and war. And he studied the Hiroshima bombing closely and talked with the survivors and realized that right after the bombing, there was this deterioration of capacity, inclination to feel in the survivors. They could see all the death and destruction around them, but a part of them really shut down. Feelings and thoughts were completely separated. And this was, at the moment, of course, a necessary defense mechanism to survive, to stay alive. And so there was a purpose to it. But Lifton also observed that when that state of mind became permanent, it became further debilitating and dangerous. This is trauma now we're talking about. And people became more and more detached and disaffiliated with the outside world. So James Hillman read this and thought, well, I observe a similar phenomenon here in the contemporary American culture. However, it's not caused by the perils of war as in Hiroshima. It's just is a result of and just ever perpetuated by very small, everyday, mundane, small phenomena. He, talks about screen saturation, noise pollution, artificial lights, the caffeine, the high sugar, high salt, high fat diet, pharmaceuticals. All these things accumulate in our lives, shutting down our senses. It's very overwhelming. So we shut down our senses. We just keep going, doing what we do. We go to work, we come home, we turn the TV on, we cook our meals. And in that sense, Hillman says it really benefits the hyper-capitalist system. Because we're just, we're cogs in the machine and numb and just keep going. And Eric Fromm would say, this is the pathology of normalcy, right? Mm-hmm. So there is, given everything that's happening in our world right now, in the United States right now, and there's no sugarcoating it, we're going through some very dark times: war, political violence, corporate corruption, political corruption for sure, so much greed, environmental destruction. There's so much, right? It's very overwhelming. But also there's another person I always go back to, John M. Macy, who talks about more dangerous than the risk of permanent war, complete environmental collapse, more dangerous almost is this deadening of our response, because that makes all of this possible, right? It's dulls our imagination. We don't feel, we don't vision, and we just go with it. So what does Hillman say is an antidote to psychic numbing is aesthetic response. And I find this very inspiring. This is exactly what inspired the book. And he talks about aesthetic response not as a doctrine of art aesthetics, but more the root of that word, aesthetics, comes from the Greek perception, senses. So it's a matter of waking up, feeling, embodying our reactions and responses to the world around us. And the way Hillman talks about it is quite bodily. It is, listening to your gut. It's intuitive. It's very authentic, relational. And that instance of awakening really is political act, the way Hillman sees it. We're living in a world that is designed to shut our senses down, keep us small, and just be a part of the system. And in that world, just waking up, noticing what's wrong around, engaging, expressing, standing up, speaking out, that is a revolutionary act in itself. And I see that as psychological activism, first of all, that moment of waking up, and it's a practice. It's not just once and for all. We have to engage, keep waking up every day when we wake up. And the whole thing about the Allen Ginsberg's poem, America, to me is so much about that. It's like, he wrote that in 1956, so 70 years ago. And it's so relevant in this moment. And what makes it so relevant also is, he talks about capitalism, of course, and war and foreign enemies and media, all of that. But the way he writes it, it's so intimate. It's a confessional letter, right? And he talks about his outrage and sorrow and disillusionment and resentment, and it's all with all its complexity. He's not above it all. He's in it, and he's wrestling with it. And that was so moving to me. I've read that poem countless times, and I just go back to it as I go back to many other poems during times like this. But I wanted to write a response to it, and you happened to read that article later. So it is, I think, Ginsberg's work, as with many other poets and artists, it's really about that aesthetic response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at the outset I said Ginsberg's Howl, which is another of his works that is really
That's true.
close to my heart, is this lone wolf howling in the wilderness of modernity. But you're speaking of America, which actually I don't think I realized that it was written in 56. So before the Vietnam War, before the upheaval of the 1960s. So almost Ginsberg acting as a prophet. And I think demonstrating what Hillman says is, what he calls the empty protest. We're open to the world, we're affected by it, we have an aesthetic response to the beauty and the ugliness. And it's enough to cry out and say, I hate this. I don't necessarily know what we need to do about it, but I just have to say, I think this is wrong, I think this is terrible, et cetera, right? And so I think that's kind of what Ginsberg is embodying in the speaking writing of that piece.
Very much
Because he
so.
doesn't
And
offer solutions, right?
no solutions, no solutions. And it is in a world as the one we're living in, it's all about solutions. You go to the bookstore and it's, how to be rich in 3 months, how to lose however many pounds in however many weeks, and 7 steps to happiness. It's all quantified. The goal is to get it done and get it done fast. When you look at it from this completely different lens of empty protest, there's no treatment plan. There's no game plan. There are no steps. There's no necessarily strategy. There's no outcomes that you can tell. It's a complete decentering of the ego and following the uncertainty, not knowing, and still staying with it.
Mm.
It's hard for this culture. It's controversial, in fact. Then why are you doing it? But I wonder sometimes about that, because the word empty even has a negative connotation in the Western culture, where, if we looked at it from an Eastern philosophy,
Yeah.
the emptiness is part of it, and it's where things just will birth from. When we breathe, we inhale, we're full, we exhale, we're empty. It's all part of that circular. So it's empty
Mhm.
protest is necessary, the way I see it, and it's can be very fertile in a way.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, the emptiness, I think Hillman relates it to kenosis, the
Mhm.
biblical idea of emptying out. And it is definitely there in Eastern religious traditions and philosophies. But I also see it in some Native American philosophy too, specifically Frank Foolscrow, when he said his life philosophy was that of the hollow bone. And so, what the way that I understand that is emptying yourself out so that spirit can move through you. And so that clearing out, so emptying yourself of the heroic ego, always wanting to fix things, to find solutions right away, to take action right away, and to see where the spirit moves you instead, and proceeding from there. It's a totally different response. It's not
Yeah.
passive, but it's maybe patient and like you said, staying with that feeling. Don't push it aside. Don't distract yourself from the feeling of like, ugh, oh, oh, staying with that and then seeing maybe what wants to come through you, how you can act in
Yeah.
response.
Yeah, and then when I listen to you say all that, I'm also realizing the relational aspect of it again, right?
Hmm.
You are in relationship to whatever is to come, whether you call it spirit, solidarity. I'm not going to say solution, because this is not about solutions, right? But this receiving, it's about reciprocity, and being
Hmm.
open-minded, open-hearted, being just open and present, which again, in this in our society, with everything that's happening, it's so hard to stay open and present, right? Where always our attention is so spread thin. It's like posts, memes, tweets, newsreel, and another soundbite. The whole spectacle is about keeping us so distracted, um, and
Yeah,
without seeing the bigger picture.
yeah. And also, I'm just kind of riffing on what you're saying. And it also, so much of our current time, we're inundated with more and more information and images. So we're always kept full. We're kept full of other people's ideas, of images and what's going on in the world, more information, more solutions. And so I think part of the empty protest is first stepping back from the consuming of more and more and more. So there's something of that too, like just stopping The
Mm-hmm.
value of just stopping, taking everything in, of seeking the immediate solution or another hot take or a commentator's perspective on something and just allowing for yourself to empty out. That's a big move.
Yeah. And I
And,
think that is the difference between information and wisdom, right?
mhm,
We're receiving all this information, like you're saying, we're in pursuit of the next soundbite, someone's commentary, without having the opportunity to sit with and feel, think about, question, and find our own inner voice, the wisdom. Um, yeah, there's
mhm,
so many missed opportunities here, and also, we were talking about aesthetic responsibility. The word responsibility, right? It's responsibility. Like, how do we cultivate that ability to respond again? I think that's one of the tasks at hand.
mhm. Yeah, and I can't help but be reminded of the Quaker practice of sitting in silence and waiting for the spirit, for lack of a better word, to speak through you, that still small voice within. And, I think from a archetypal perspective, we might even open that up to the many voices within. Which one wants to step forward in this moment and cry out in despair or in anger or whatever wants to happen, but kind of clearing the space for the many voices within, perhaps.
So true. I think we can even look at that from another perspective too. The many voices that we need at times like this for social change. There is a place for the um, legal, there is policy, there is um, also the grassroots community organizer. There's the person who is using the silk screens to make signs. There is the person who does the call and response. There's a place for the poet and the journalist and the photographer. I mean, we are all part of this ecosystem, and we all step in when we need to. The multiplicity of it, that always is, the way I see it, is the gift, is
Mm,
the strength. Um, but again, we are in a political ecosystem right now that is really prefers black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking. There is no place for diversity, multiplicity. It feels very threatening. So there's this desire to regress
mhm.
to times, regress to thoughts that just simplify the world, reduce it, and given the technological speed, we were, from AI to everything. Things are changing so fast. People who need stability, they do long for that regression. But we
Mhm.
can't, I mean, we're in it. We're in it. We're all here in it together. So how can we make the best out of it together? The solidarity, I keep coming back to that word of like radical solidarity.
Yeah. Well, there is something about the empty protest that if you have the courage um, to to express the empty protest, that others will hear it, and you'll find the others who don't want to take refuge in particular group or old time religion or whatever it is. But like this is such a big part of this podcast for me and why I call it Howl in the Wilderness, because it is so much about the empty protest, about wondering out loud, about being troubled in public, because something in me knew that if I had the courage to do that and not just keep offering solutions or something, that the others would find it. The other people who are kind of on the edges and in that place of, I call it radical ambivalence, not taking any particular side because you feel overwhelmed and isolated and alone. Like that's completely understandable. But there is like another kind of out group of people who aren't so quick to take sides or to rush in and try to solve something, but who are troubled. who are engaged, who are responsive to what's happening. And so, like, you put out this article and I saw it and it struck me and it touched me. And I thought, okay, Ipek's like one of my people. Like we're kind of in this alternate group in a way. And so you end up finding the comfort, solidarity, support that you're looking for if you have the courage to be alone, at least for a time. You know what I mean? Not so quick to just kind of jump into an established group or something, or the group that's the loudest or seems the most strong. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
It does make sense, and there's so much noise out there, right?
Hmm.
Um, the loudness. But also, what I'm hearing you say is this: the individual healing, right? Individual salvation in a way is never completely separate from there. There is a collective, a community part of it that is so important. And James Hillman beautifully, in my opinion, criticized the world of psychotherapy and like it's not just about me, my serotonin level, it's not just about me and my childhood, that we all live in these systems, larger systems under power. Transportation is a part of it, healthcare system is a part of it, everything is a part of it. So it though it feels like our problems are within ourselves, we're also a part of that system. And if we listen to our symptoms, it's not just about us. And in that, we can find our communities too. I mean, if we're not gonna get to social change if we stay just within. So those who have the courage, and I think it takes some courage, like you're doing, to howl in the wilderness, to put a call out, and to find your clan, and then do the work together. And this is part of that, what you're doing beautifully with this podcast, for instance.
Hmm. Yeah, well, at the very least, I hope it's inspiring to other people. And I think, just what I've found is for me and for some others that in times like this, a depth psychological or archetypal perspective can be so helpful, like seeing through everything that's happening on the surface, all of the propaganda that's being put out, all of the responses and counter responses, but trying to understand maybe like the deeper themes or patterns that are happening, gives you enough of a distance from them that you don't get caught up in it, that you're not completely swept away by your emotional response, but you're sticking with it, but you're also trying to always see through. That to me just seems so skillful in times like this.
Yes. And in that you get to appreciate the complexity of it all, right? Because
Yeah.
the ambivalence belongs, and the ambiguity and all the paradoxes, contradictions, all of that belong in that picture that you look at. Um, and and there are no answers, right? But that doesn't mean we stop um, interrogating.
Hmm.
Uh, it is, you know, dear James Hillman again had a beautiful quote about this. I'd rather complicate than give a simple answer, something along those lines.
Yeah.
He could make others think and wrestle with ideas, which is a lost art, perhaps.
Hmm. Oh, yeah, definitely. um, you know, Ambiguity, uncertainty causes anxiety,
Yeah.
right? And so understandable with everything else that's going on, economic pressures and everything that's happening in the world right now, housing instability, food instability, looming war, and for us, the invasion from the United States always being a threat. Will we be made the, what is it, the 52nd state or whatever? With all that going on, the added anxiety of not knowing what to do, not, maybe feeling isolated and alone or uncertain. Of course, you're going to want to find a way out of that, initially. But there's something like finding solidarity. I want to say solace, but that's not the right word. I think solidarity, like what you said, is more appropriate in in not only other people who are speaking out and thinkers like Hillman or Joanna Macy or whoever, but also in the arts, like listening to a song that is full of that kind of that same empty protest, or a poem, something in that that is heartening, emboldening. I'm not alone in this. Okay, I'm not crazy to be so upset at the new shopping mall that's being put up in that old wilderness area, or whatever it is. Yeah, Joni Mitchell crying out about the paving the parking lots. Like there's something about that that feels really important, and yeah, strengthening or comforting in a way. Mm.
Yeah. And once you start paying attention, you start noticing more and more those pieces of art and aesthetic responses. I will say, now that I'm in the midst of this book, for instance, I have a whole newfound appreciation for graffiti and murals. They're
Mm.
everywhere. I walked by so many of them without noticing their details before. I took them for granted. And now I stop and look up close. And I feel moved. They moved, and so many shades of feeling, right? Sadness to fear to anger, all of that in those images. And I witness, I empathize with them. But it's so many places, like you were saying, just it can be a blues song, it can be theater, it can be ceremony, weaving or canoe making in some cultures, just this ongoing dialogue within communities, and sometimes with ancestors, sometimes with viewers, witnesses like me. That person who's putting the work out there has no idea who's going to see it, how they're going to respond. But it is a howl in the wilderness,
Hmm.
um, and it echoes,
Hmm.
reverberates, and it touches. When it touches, it changes. So it's all those instances that we don't hear about. When you look at the newspaper headlines every day, we see, a few people in power making decisions, fighting one another. We don't have nobody tells us about the muralist who was
Yeah.
painting that corner the other day, and what the story that was putting on there, and whose story, why, all those, they all are part of it. We just have to wake up, perhaps, and notice more.
Yeah, it's so true. And even in my small town, a friend of mine who's an international artist, originally from Mexico City, he's been doing this community mural project where he's having students and adults from the community come in and paint this mural that's going to be put on the community school that tells the story of warming of the oceans and how that's affecting the kelp systems. And and it's something that not many people will see. It's a small enough community, and it'll be like kind of, alongside on the side of the school. But there is a response, an aesthetic response to something that's happening in the world that's troubling people. And so it's bringing some kind of awareness, but it's also in the engagement in that project. It's again finding community, finding solidarity, doing something. Even if it's not going to solve the problem, it may be out of our hands to solve that problem. but it's doing something, and that in itself feels healing to me without any solution. You know,
Yeah.
there can be healing without a solution to the problem, right?
Yeah.
Isn't,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of just coming to me now, but the implications of this.
Hmm. I mean, the psychology, if we go to Jungian psychology, for instance, the individuation process, as Jung talks about it, there is this innate need, desire um, to for connection, for meaning. And the whole journey of individuation is not ever complete because you don't get to a place and say, and today at 9 a.m., I've become an individuated human being. No, it's a lifelong process. There's no end to it. It's not easy, but you stay with it, an ongoing process. It's a practice. And I think of it, and sometimes I think about democracy that way. Is there perfect democracy? No, we'll never achieve it. Does that mean we just give up on it? No, we keep practicing, and we as citizens, and it's not just casting a vote every 4 years, obviously. How do we show up and be a part of this journey? And there's so many different ways. It's being a muralist is one, but also walking by the mural and noticing it, staying
Hmm.
with it. It's a descent, and it's about reading poetry. It's all of those things actually are pieces of that whole. Can we have that? When we look at it in that sense, then it doesn't feel like, for instance, if you're living in the US like me, oh, it's all happening in DC and the White House, so far away. Have no agency. I have, no power, and there's nothing for me to do. So I'm gonna, medicate myself with whatever retail therapy or whatever it takes, right?
Doom scrolling.
Yeah, doom scrolling. I mean, yeah, and how does that help, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but so yeah, and I'm learning more and more what you have just said about your friend who's an artist. The healing is in the process. The healing is in the community that comes together. And it's those are maybe there's no solution, but they activate something within, right? Whether it's a
Mhm.
memory, whether it's a insight, dare I say hope, it's
Mhm.
all of that.
Well, imagination, right?
Imagination.
Yeah, and there's something too that's coming to me about like that the aesthetic response doesn't need to be overtly political.
No.
Like if I'm troubled by the ugliness of what's going on with ice or any number of things, my response could be to create more beauty. And that's it. I mean, to me, that's a completely valid response.
Mm.
Like if I'm troubled by the ugliness of things in the world, the way the shopping malls are being designed and the new modular homes or whatever, well, why not create some beauty? Put some beauty out in the world, to counterbalance the ugliness.
Mm. Yeah. And like, because beauty is obviously very repressed, right? So is connection, because it is, behind our screens, we're isolated, detached, and we feel small. So making a connection with someone, having a conversation, right? Even that, the power
Hmm.
of that. It's not overtly political,
But it is,
but
but
it
it is
is. It has
political.
political implications. Not the yeah, yeah. So
Not
how
the Senate and the City
exactly?
Hall and all of that, but going back to, Hillman always referencing who was it that said man is inherently a political animal? Aristotle, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. and that took me a while to kind of grok because I always associated politics with the guys in parliament or in the city hall, but political meaning of the polis of the city or the town or the community, you could say. So the personal is always political, and the political is always personal because we can't be separated from that.
Yeah.
Unless we're living in a cave up on a mountain somewhere, but we're probably still going to be affected by the regional laws and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's no escaping it.
And because of that, I mean, the psychological repression and political oppression go hand in hand. Psychological
Mm.
suffering and all the political, sociopolitical injustices, violence, inequalities, all of that go hand in hand. I mean, yeah, yes, despite what self-help books might say about, it's your choice to be happy, and this is, you
Yeah.
just adjust your mindset, stop the inflow of negative vibes, negative news, negative thoughts, negative people. It is, I mean, again, Hillman said it so beautifully. I think suffering is not illness, it's the not being able to suffer, the capacity for suffering and understanding and holding that is the real illness. And I think all of that is political, had these
Mm.
political implications because the personal and political, like you said, it's hand in hand. Um, yeah.
Yeah. And even just kind of pushing it further, um, all of our interactions with others day to day is political.
Mhm.
So the way that we respond and treat others is also political action for, for better or for worse, right? And so just thinking about that, what can I do as this person who doesn't have any quote unquote political power? Well, the things that I do day to day, the interactions that I have, all have political implications.
Mhm.
Mm.
And recognizing that, owning that, and being intentional about that
Hmm.
will bring about such incredible change
Mm.
on small, even if it just looks small, it's that one rock that hits the pond water, right? And the circles appear.
Yeah,
If,
yeah.
if we all were to wake up and recognize that, um, yeah.
Yeah, and understand that we all have the power to affect and influence others for better or for worse. Like
Mm-hmm.
we all know the experience of somebody saying an unkind word or cutting us off in traffic and flipping us the bird or that kind of offense, how it can affect us throughout the day and maybe even wake you up at 3 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
That is power.
Yeah.
So conversely, those small acts of kindness and offering your presence to someone who just wants to talk about whatever, those are also political actions and making change. Like, yeah, that little pebble in the water, it's going to affect that person, and who knows how that's going to change their day and the way they interact with others, or what choice they make at the voting poll.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's revolutionary because in a way, I mean, we do live in a toxic culture within the social media realm. People have become bullies and it's been normalized to be rude. And we talk about democratic recession, but what about the empathy recession, right? We were not necessarily, there's huge gaps. People don't want to put themselves in somebody else's shoes and imagine what that might be like. Um, and I don't know, it's perhaps because they're so afraid to feel the depths of despair and fear and um, maybe they're so tightly holding on to their survival in this crazy world, and if they were to imagine anything else their minds are going to explode. But
Yeah.
their minds should explode and their hearts should break wide open because there's no change without that really staying with the symptoms and the anxiety. We're talking about anxiety. Anxiety is so hard. That's why we have so many prescribed pills. So many people are on antidepressants and anxiety pills to just make it through their daily life. But with that, we're also just again numb, just again doing what we need to do without seeing all those, the importance of what you were just talking about, the little acts, the connections, what it means. What would our anxiety have to say to us is what I assume James Hillman would ask, right?
Mm. Yeah, well, he always would say that symptoms have a purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? So,
Yes.
what's the anxiety trying to do? Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's that thing about anxiety that anxiety, has been defined as fear without an object. It's just this kind of like swirl or cloud of fear. We call it anxiety because we can't put our finger on like what I'm afraid of or why am I anxious? I'm just anxious. And I think so then for me as someone who works with people, the way to follow the anxiety is to go in it and try to find the object at the root of the fear. And like you were saying, people have a lot of defenses up against finding that because once you get down to it, it might shake the foundation of your belief system or your worldview.
Yeah.
And so part of that is like doing what Hillman would say is like turning the therapy room into a cell of revolution and allowing ourselves to have conversations about the world and how we're affected by the world and not just internalizing everything, you know? Like, oh, I feel so helpless with everything that's going on in the White House and on the streets. Oh, well, how does that remind you of your father and feeling helpless? That kind of move, but actually just staying with it. Like the problem is out there and I'm in the problem and I'm affected by it. Maybe then we can start to identify real sources of fear. And then we've got something actually. It's not just this cloud of anxiety that's swirling around us, but we've got an object of our fear that is likely very justifiable. To have the courage to open up a space where we're talking about the, financial insecurity, food insecurity, climate insecurity, all of that. And those are such big problems that none of us will have any answers for it. And I think that's also, the reluctance to go there is because the therapist is someone who's tasked with helping people find solutions to their problems and to meet their goals and be more well adapted and all of that. But to open up a space of ambiguity, not knowing, uncertainty, of as a therapist, being able to empty yourself out too of that need to have a solution for your client and just understand the value of opening up a space where the real fears can be named.
Mm-hmm.
That to me that's radical.
Yeah. It reminds me when I was in graduate school, one of the professors said something that was quite unpopular in the class, but I thought it was radical and revolutionary. And he said, "We are not here learning to become therapists, so we stop someone's suffering. We're there to make their suffering more, help them find meaning in it, make it a more meaningful process." So they can get to be on their journey, but not to fix. Yeah, I did bring. If you
Mm.
can give me a second, I have this quote by Hillman that I printed out. Is that okay to share?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Because I keep coming back to it a lot in this political climate. I keep thinking about it I kept thinking about it as politics, and now I'm having a shift in my understanding. But Hillman wrote, sitting still, reflecting, remembering, grieving, and giving in now carry the flag forward. Because forward is not where it used to be. Going on now means going downward into the faults of our culture and backwards into the griefs of its memories. Today, We need heroes of dissent, not masters of denial, mentors of maturity who can carry sadness, who show soul without irony or embarrassment. Legendary heroes of the ancient world, Ulysses, Psyche, Persephone, Orpheus, Dionysos, all descended into hell to learn other values than those rule the daily business of sunlit life. They came back with a darker eye that can see in a dark time. I just,
Hmm.
I recite that. That's like a mantra in a way. Coming back with a darker eye that can see in a dark time. And I think that's your work that you're doing right now, right here.
Hmm.
It's so many artists. Initially I was trying to think like political leaders. No political leader will take that role on to,
Hmm.
sitting with the faults of the culture and carrying the sadness with maturity. That's like they're very trying to get their campaign money for the next election, right? They're very busy with other. So I was like, who are these leaders? Who can we look up to? And then it occurred to me, yes, they are the poets, right? They're the artists, they're the blues singers. They are people who engaged in these conversations, who show up, who paint the mural like your friend is painting. And they can carry it with dignity, with courage. And they are all, though unnamed in the newspapers, they're all those heroes, are heroes, heroes of dissent that can
Hmm.
bring their darker eye of wisdom. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think that passage is so powerful and actually kind of surprising in its like positivity and dare I say hopefulness or this kind of call to action. It's kind of unlike Hillman in some way. Where is that from?
Or his book on power, The Force of Power. I'm going to get back to you on the exact.
Oh, kinds of
Or I can pick
power.
it up. It's right behind me. Yeah.
Kinds of power.
Kinds of power. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, that's one that I've kind of skimmed through, but I didn't think was so
It's not
interesting to me because it was written for like this business community.
exactly,
But
exactly.
man, there's some gems in there. Okay,
There
I'm gonna
always is
I'm gonna
with
pull that.
Hellman. But
I'm
that,
gonna pull that quote out and include it for the patrons. Yeah, I
yeah.
think that's
And
really great.
I have skipped some parts of it. This is like a condensed version, of course. And I'm happy to share it with you with the page number. But it is like keep coming back to it. Just like you said, it is not the book of Hellman's that I go back to usually. But that really, this one stays with me, especially as we wrestling with the soul of the country, in a way
Hmm.
to quote from Adrienne Rich.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. To show soul, that takes so much courage these days. I think about that often, because one of my, the things that I grieve or the things that I've longed for so long is soul. Soulful people, the people I admired as artists and musicians and actors who just show so much soul. It's taken me a long time to realize it, but even from a very young age, that's what I was attracted to. And that's what I was always looking for in other people is that soulful connection, like the just being nakedly real with one another and speaking about things of depth, not just talking about the weather or the hockey game. Yeah, yeah, those things are great, but I want more, you know? And so, yeah, these days it's very rare to find people who even speak of soul. Like I'm trying to think of last time I heard a leader speak about the soul of the nation,
mhm.
in the way that, a Martin Luther King or maybe even John F. Kennedy did, you know. It seems, yeah, it's been lost.
Yeah, it's even that's polarized. It's like our national soul versus their national soul. It's
Hmm.
Yeah,
Our, well,
it's
it's more our America,
our
you know.
America.
Yeah,
It is.
is being threatened.
Yeah, I mean, and that there's this beautiful poem of Adrienne Rich's called "Diving into the Wreck," and in I does she say it in that poem? Perhaps in a different place, but she does talk about it's in a different poem. I'm misquoting, but she talks about the wrestling with the soul of the nation. You have to do that as you wrestle with your own soul.
Mm,
And
mm,
she's like trying to come to terms with what it is to be a patriot. And in that, the way she talks about it as being a patriot is that wrestling is a part of it, right? And it's an ethical responsibility in a way. Um,
mm. That sounds like something that maybe you had included in your book, The Myth of America.
yeah, I talked about bell hooks for sure and
Bell
the
hooks
ethics
and
of yeah, yeah. And it's also, I mean, I always go back to James Baldwin. You know, he's one of my heroes of dissent, I would say.
mm,
He talks about his love for this country, and he was a very strong critic of especially racial relationships and the um, injustice of this country, obviously. But he said, I love America more than any other nation. And this is why I insist on my right to criticize her all the time. And so, what he's saying, the way I hear it, is it comes from a place of love because he knows this nation can do better, so
mm.
much better, and he's gonna push, and it's to me always very problematic when patriotism does not allow room for questioning
Hmm.
or discussion. Then to me that is not about love, it's about fear. Like if you really loved your country so much, you thought it was so strong, it could surely withstand some critical thinking, right? But it's a projection. You're that is not if you love someone, you have to be in relationship with them. You love them with their all their quirkiness and imperfections because that's who they are. If you're loving someone for the idea, oh, they're perfect, very strong, you know, I'm very proud, then it's an illusion. It's not the person that you're loving, but your idea, your illusion. Um,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
it's like it takes so much effort to keep those illusions alive, especially in times like this when everything seems to be falling apart. But to insist and not see the shadows um, cast everywhere. It's
Yeah, I'm,
willful.
yeah, at this point, um, the whole Make America Great Again thing, it, I just can't, it's almost absurd to me the level of denial that is operating there because everyone can see what's going on now. That's one of the things about social media and the internet is, we've got, citizen reporters everywhere. We can see what's really going on, even while the leader is up there telling everyone how wonderful America is. And so that cognitive dissonance is also, I think, part of what's driving people crazy right now and falling into ideas about, everything being a simulation because it does seem so absurd. It seems like you're watching some strange movie. Meanwhile, when you turn away and you see reality, what's going on, it just doesn't match.
Yeah, I mean, haven't we all read, you know, dystopian novels as such, or watched movies that were dystopian but also funny, you know? And then you're seeing it. Yeah,
Oh
I don't
yeah,
know.
I
I'm
always
lost for
reference
words.
that movie, the Mike Judge movie, Idiocracy,
Oh, I
well,
watched that recently again. Yes.
where the professional wrestler becomes president, and it looks so ridiculous, and people are so numbed out and pacified, you know. And now, I think in a couple months' time, there's going to be a live UFC event in the White House. Like they're building an auditorium to have, UFC fighting in the White House. And then Trump goes to he's ringside at the fights. And I mean, it all just seems so bizarre and absurd to me. And God, like if it seems so frivolous in a way with everything that's going on, like this is what the president is doing and putting time, effort, and money into is hosting, I love the UFC, I love martial arts, but like really? Really?
Well,
I
again,
mean,
it's all about spectacle, right?
yeah,
It's
right.
there's just all these appearances. Chris Hedges had a book called Empire of Illusions, and he talked a lot about wrestling.
Hmm,
And this book is from the 1990s, if I remember correctly. There's also Trump in it. I should revisit it. But
hmm,
it is so much about spectacle, it feels like. And I actually have also been revisiting some other Neil Postman. He wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death, and he wrote
right.
this in 1985. So this is like 40 years ago now, and it's chilling to revisit and realize so much of those insights, how they they hit. It's painful almost. But
Hmm,
he in that book he compares Orwell's dystopian world of 1984 to Huxley's Brave New World. And he says, Orwell was worried that now there would be all this like very repressive regime and like controlled by punishment. And for Huxley, he thought there was no need for all that punishment because people would just repress themselves through pleasure. Um, Orwell worried about books being banned and burned, and Huxley was worried about nobody would care to read books. Like all these
hmm,
differences, right? And the way Postman saw was that we were going in the direction of Huxley's dystopia, where everybody's just numb and doing their thing, and it's not paying attention and happy, very happy in their willful ignorance. Um, and then again, though, I will say, when I think of it, there is also the big brother out there. There are
hmm.
many big brothers, across all platforms. And as the citizens, will give all our information very happily, willingly to be on different platforms so we can shop from this site
Hmm.
and post on this site. And it's just hand over. And I'm part of it, it's mind blowing, it's disturbing, it's exhausting to hold it all, and this is our daily life right now.
Yeah, it's soul rending.
Yes.
Um, and I think as you're speaking, I'm realizing, well, maybe the reality is a blend of Huxley's vision and Orwell's vision.
Yeah, that's what
Because,
I'm
like,
exactly.
yeah, like you said, we do kind of both things are going on at the same
They are
time.
hand in hand. They're right now hand in hand, and it's happening in real time.
Yeah. Can I just have like a 1 minute break? I got my
Absolutely.
legs asleep. I got to get the sleeping dog off of me.
I just went back to my shelves and I got this little gem. Do you know this one?
No, I've never seen that,
Um,
but I know
so
Ferlinghetti.
Ferlinghetti, of course, me living in San Francisco, he's, talk about a hero.
Right,
And
City Lights bookstore,
City
right?
Lights Bookstore, which I have the great honor and pleasure to work with from time to time. I moderate events for them. But
Wait, it's still
um,
a brick and mortar place?
yes, oh,
Oh,
wonderful.
oh.
It is a
See, that gives
sanctuary.
me hope. That gives me
There,
hope.
it's 3 stories of labyrinth. You cannot go find the book you're looking for. You first have to get lost.
Oh, amazing. So it's like a
And
Powell's or a Strand.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Oh,
You get lost and then
my favorite kind of labyrinths. Yeah.
yes, it is. I was there last Wednesday morning, for instance. Yeah,
Oh,
with out of
jealous.
towners. Yeah, it is. It is a sanctuary, truly. So Ferlinghetti has this little gem of a book called "Poetry as Insurgent Art." It's very short little lines. And with our conversation, I thought it would be appropriate to bring it down and just read a few sentences, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
So he writes, I'm signaling you through the flames. The North Pole is not where it used to be. Manifest destiny is no longer manifest. Civilization self-destructs. Nemesis is knocking at the door. What are poets for in such an age? What is the use of poetry? The state of the world calls out for poetry to save it. A voice in the wilderness.
That pricked my ears up.
Yes, I know.
That's great. Oh,
And then
go.
he says, if you would be a poet, create works capable of answering the challenge of apocalyptic times, even if this means sounding apocalyptic, which is sort of what we're doing here.
Totally. Yeah. Oh, that's so good.
It is very refreshing. The call to action, a wake up call. Yeah, he's
Yeah, even
he's a
if it's
hero.
apocalyptic, so not giving a utopic solution-based response.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to kind of circle back to as well. You know, you mentioned empathy before, and you know what's happening currently with this attack on empathy, where empathy is being seen as like it's being pathologized. It's being seen as a weakness. And when I think about empathy and what cultivates empathy, for me, that's so wrapped up in being a lifelong reader of not self-help books, of literature, of
Mhm.
fantasy novels, of the beat poets, of because for me, reading is like this shamanic act of being able to enter into another's consciousness and being affected by their experience. And looking back on my life, seeing what a gift it was to have access to books, not highbrow books. I'm talking like reading Stephen King when I was 6 years old, but incredibly affecting stories. And along with that, you talked about Huxley saying that we won't have to burn the books because people will just lose interest in reading, and that's a reality. If we look at the stats on literacy and who's reading books, it's gone down like something like 40% in the past 5 or 10 years, something like that, like really drastic. And I think what a lot of people are doing now is looking to AI for the two-paragraph book summary.
Mhm.
And that breaks my heart because I know the consequence of that is a lack of empathy, or at least
Yeah.
one of the things that contributes to greater empathy. And so it's for me, it's so much wrapped up in technology, in our giving over of our agency, of our own creativity, and even giving our thinking, outsourcing our thinking to these
Mhm.
AI robots. And so, like, when I see how AI is being taken up by everybody I know, you know, I'm constantly surprised that people who I really respect, who are deep thinking people, are relying on AI for everything, writing their course outlines and their social media posts and their Substack essays, et cetera, et cetera. And gosh, I do feel quite small and helpless in the face of that. It just seems like this huge wave that's carrying everybody along with it. And again, like my only response is to be, well, have these flawed human conversations and not use AI to edit out all the little ums and ahs, but keep putting out, conversations where it's like two real humans thinking on their feet out loud.
Mhm. Together.
Yeah, because I do think part of the anesthetizing of our culture that wasn't around when Hillman was writing about it is the proliferation of AI content and AI edited content, which a lot of people who aren't in the business don't even know that's what they're listening to. is these very kind of artificial podcasts or lectures that have been finely edited, every millisecond, of space removed, every and ah removed, every fumbled word taken out and maybe even corrected. And I think it's conditioning people to accept something that is quite actually inhuman in
Yeah.
its imperfection. So I'm like, part of my aesthetic art activism is to put out things that are messy, imperfect, tangential, lacking a point or a kind of nice landing point where we've sorted it all out. Great. No accomplishment other than having a real human conversation. There's something
Human.
in that. Again, I'm thinking out loud and throwing it out there for any response you might have.
Yeah, well, first of all, starting with books, it all started with books for me, novels, so that's brought me to psychology, brought me to everything I'm doing. And I loved what you said about almost the shamanic journey of reading. We can think of every book we read as a vision quest in a way that we,
Totally. Totally.
um, and the how sad it is that, people are no longer reading. They don't have the attention span, even not only it's not just only disinterest, but also the incapacity to hold a book of 300 pages, and it's just so frightening. It's so alien. But with that not reading, we're losing an opportunity to also learn how to read the world around us.
Mm.
Because through
Mhm.
books we learned to read the world, humans, relationships, Earth. Um, there's so many ways to get to it, but books for people like me, and I'm hearing that you too, literature was a big part of that. Um, and then, you were talking about your activism and putting out the imperfect podcasts with all the pauses and the, not edited. And it's, one of my activisms, if I can call it that, and I should, is I'm a bookworm and I love having books and reading only paper books, and I buy them in independent bookstores. My city
Mhm.
down the street, there is dog-eared books, and I will go there, I will walk there and ask if they have a certain book. If they don't, I order it. In 48 hours, they bring it, but I refuse to buy it from Amazon.
Mm.
It would be convenient. It would be, I'm sure, cheaper too. But there is something about um, I supporting my independent bookstore down the street, supporting the book industry. That is one of the things that I want to be very intentional about. And one of the small, very small changes I can make, um, you know,
Well,
and
that's okay. Just to pause there, because this
yeah,
is really this is important because this is showing. Okay, Hillman's whole idea about if we reawaken our aesthetic sensibility
mhm,
and we allow ourselves to be affected by the world, the beauty and the ugliness, what that allows us to do or what that engenders is a love for the world. And like you mentioned before, the things that we love, the people that we love, we just naturally want to care for them because things we love, people we love, we want the best for them. We want them to flourish. So we love used bookstores, labyrinthine used bookstores, the smell, the eccentric person at the desk who has arcane knowledge about who knows what. You'll always be surprised, pulling a used book off the shelf and finding a love note from the person who gifted the book originally. I've had so many different surprises in used books. So if we do love that because we're open and affected and we're in touch with our own aesthetic response, we're going to want to preserve that thing, or at least nurture it, nourish it, so that it exists as long as it can. And so for you, that means kind of being vigilant about getting your books from these local bookstores. That's so great. And I just want to say, as somebody who's moved to a small place where actually there's one little used bookstore now, but they have a very kind of small selection. But finding thrift books, which is an online seller,
Yes.
reseller of used books. And I tell you, I can find anything on there, and it comes from some local used bookseller. And again, comes in the mail full of surprises. It's wonderful, actually. And it's so much more, it gives me so much more of a kind of soul connection to the book than if I get the brand new thing next day delivery on Amazon, where it's never been handled. There's no notes in it. There's no bookmarks in it. Um, you know, so there's something like very fulfilling and gratifying about this sort of activism.
Personal. It's so personal, right?
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
very personal, small personal act, and you're making a connection through that book with someone who you'll never ever know, but it feels intimate. It's suddenly not an object of, new release object that is, um, you know, yeah,
Just
it's
clean and never been touched. No dog-eared pages, no underlines. Like the thing is, when I get a book that's been inscribed, you know, to Joan from John. I hope you like this book as much as I did. All of a sudden, I'm imagining Joan and John. Were they married? Were they lovers? Were they friends? Um, and then you get into the book and you see that it's been underlined in certain sections, and you start to wonder about this person who did that. Well, why did they think that was so significant? Huh? Maybe there's something in that sentence that I'm not getting right now, And all of a sudden, like your imagination is open. Joan is like in the room with you. You're reading the book with her, or something like that. I mean, that's so kind of magical in a way, and you lose all of that when you download it on your Kindle or you get the brand new copy straight from the publisher or whatever.
yeah. And when you're describing that, that is an aesthetic response too, right?
Yeah.
The act of reading, the act of receiving and imagining, being curious, noticing the note and going with it. Those are all part of the practice. And to me, this is why I feel so compelled and so interested in this concept of aesthetic response and how it awakens us, brings us back into our bodies and imaginations um, and communities, because it's relationship building too. Because there's so many different ways to do it. Aesthetic response is not doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a painter and you're going to paint the mural. You can just be watching, being the witness. You can be the person who's reading a secondhand book and having that experience. All of that belongs, and um, so it's authentic.
All of that, yeah, and all of that contributes to the world soul,
Yeah,
that collective soul.
isn't that reassuring when people
Yeah.
feel
Well, and
so?
it's like, oh, I'm doing something by this, by this small, seemingly small action. Man, if you follow those ripples out to like care of the world soul, wow, that's something. That's significant.
When we started, we were talking about James Hillman's definition of psychic numbing anesthesia here in the contemporary American culture. And it was the accumulation of all those small things, right? The microplastics and the artificial lights and you know, the caffeine and whatnot. All those little things, mundane things, adding up to this whole sense of overwhelm and shutting down. And so what we're doing now in this conversation, flipping that and
Hmm.
seeing all the small little acts that are the antidote to that.
Yeah. Yeah, these like homeopathic drops of soul
Yeah.
or soulfulness, you know.
Yes. Essence. Essence.
This statement popped into my head, and I think it's one of those like threads that have been through the whole conversation. But we talked about anxiety, overwhelm, all these different symptoms, right? And kind of like imagining what's at their cause and what might be an antidote. And there's the biggie that I feel sometimes these days, and I know a lot of the people who come see me are feeling, is despair. Like really feeling like they're at the end of their rope in terms of like, how the hell can I continue? You know? And what occurred to me is that despair is a deficiency of imagination. And if we understand it that way, then all these acts of igniting the imagination are going to counteract the overwhelming despair that is completely understandable to be feeling in these times.
Yeah. If there's a deficiency, here we have nourishment for it,
Hmm.
right? In small doses,
Yeah.
as one can ingest and digest. Um, yeah, because it is really, grief, fear, outrage, all of those. They're very big and very complex, and we're often holding so many of them, and it's overwhelming. But I think the most problematic is going to apathy, and not feeling anything. Despair, defeat, those are very tricky too, because they're almost at that giving up, but we can't. I mean, we can, but it's just so much at stake. And it's not just the individual. I think it's so collectively, how do we do it? And perhaps it starts with the individual. I don't have the exact answer for that, and we're not here for the answers, anyways. But how do we nourish the imagination? Well, really, there are a million different ways to do it. It really depends on the person.
Hmm.
For me, it might be going to Ferlinghetti's book of poetry at Insurgent Art and rereading that, or and for somebody else, it might be just one song that moves them. It's not about hope, really. It's about imagination. It's about being comfortable, willing to feel and break open.
Hmm.
And it's not always easy.
Hmm. There's a quote that's rattling around in my head right now, and I'm searching for the attribution, and it's not coming to me, but it's something like, I can't go on, so I'll go on.
Mm.
I can't remember where it came from. I'm going to try to find that, but it's that kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
right? Like the feeling like you can't go on and proceeding from there. Like it's
Yeah.
paradoxical,
Yeah. And
but I
it's
think
sort
it's,
of the empty protest, right?
yeah, I was going to say it's related to the empty protest.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
And
have the
that place of
answer,
like,
but yeah.
well, I don't have the, heroic ideal. I don't have the ego. My ego doesn't know, has given up. So I will pick up from there.
Hmm. Or I will descend from there.
I will descend from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Hero
And come back
of
with that dark eye.
descent. And come back with what?
With the darker eye that can see in a dark
Yeah.
time.
Gosh. Yeah. That's part of like what it has aged me, I think, in the past 10 years or so is, when I was 40, I still felt so young.
Mhm.
I felt like much the same way I felt when I was like 18. Um, and then, then shit happened. And I, willingly, in some cases, unwillingly, in other cases, had these descents. And my hair started to go gray. My eyes became darker. Uh, And I think it is like that, what you described there in that quote from Hillman, talking about Orpheus or Odysseus, those who have gone on the descent. That's what you come back with, and over time, what I've learned to value that actually, because I think I have more depth than I did then. Dare say the wisdom, even if the wisdom is knowing that I don't know anything, and the capacity to remain in uncertainty and discomfort and ambiguity and ambivalence, all of that, without it getting me too anxious, really. So that greater capacity to hold those feelings, that to me, I equate that with soul. So when Hillman talks about making soul, he never gets down to a step-by-step process for soul making, I think it's something I've had to come to my own understanding of, and I think it has to do with this, of being affected by the world, so staying open and responsive, not shutting down. And yeah,
Mhm.
that's gonna take a toll on you. That's going to age you, but I think it's aging in a good way, more character, more capacity, more compassion.
I mean, I hear so much humility in there. And to me, humility and wisdom, they go hand in hand.
Mm. Well, humility comes from the
Almost.
descent, right?
Yeah. And humus, the root even is the earth, right?
Yeah.
There's
Yeah, so you get taken down, you might get some hummus on you. You might come out more,
a
more
little dirt.
yeah, a little dirtier. Some twigs in your hair and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Not the shining golden boy anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I'm running out of steam. This has been such a deep and rich conversation.
Thank you
And
so much. Yeah, thank you.
oh my God, thank you. This has felt like really good medicine. And before we started recording, you asked how I was doing, and I said been going through this whole thing with this AI support bot trying to get my podcast distribution sorted out, and how frustrating and kind of discombobulating it was. And I was just feeling kind of like frazzled talking to this thing and not really, being able to communicate very well with it. And and then we have this conversation. It feels like just what I needed. So thank you.
A renewed faith in humanity.
Well, and just like renewed certainty that this is a medicine for our times, is having these kind of open, exploratory, tangential conversations with another human being who's wrestling with the soul of the world.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Well,
not doing it alone. So thank you for
not
doing
doing it alone.
on your
Yeah. Not bringing my problems to Chat GPT. So hopefully, if someone's listening to this, hopefully they've gotten a taste of some of that medicine. Yeah, so we're looking forward to the book. Unfortunately, it's going through Routledge, and so the publication schedules are so long and in the future,
hopefully 2027.
it won't hit dog-eared books until 2027. But until
Yes,
then, you're still writing and you're publishing articles and things, right?
I am.
So,
I am.
what's the best way for people to stay attuned to that?
Through my website, I would say, ipekburnett.com, and there is um, all my articles are usually there, not so up to date, but every few months I update it, as well as engagements, events like this one, links to different podcasts, conferences, and talks, and also there is a contact form there, so people can write to me and
Mhm.
ask questions, share their reflections. I have gotten a few hate mails in the past, but mostly has been great. So I encourage whoever feels moved to contact me through that too.
Great. Have you ever thought about starting a Substack?
It's yes, I've been asked this before. I feel, to be perfectly honest, there's so many venues right now I'm working on a book and occasionally I'm writing English articles and I also am writing have a monthly contribution to a Turkish journal about freedom of speech. So there's so many different pieces I'm writing and I'm always trying to focus. So if I add a Substack to it, I don't know how I'll necessarily manage in this moment. But there is a day I think I'm gonna, yes, take it on
Hmm.
after I finish this book,
Hmm.
perhaps.
Yeah. Well, there is something to that, and part of the reason why I was talking to the AI support bot is because I'm feeling that I need to consolidate things more now, and the more platforms you're publishing your work on, I mean, maybe this is just me, but I always feel like an obligation to the people who have signed up or even paying on those platforms to produce consistently. And that's
Hmm.
just not the way my daimon works. I mean, my daimon
Yeah.
isn't pushing me to write an article or make a podcast every week on the same day. I just
Yeah.
can't function like that. That to me is like an affront to my own soul and my daimon, who has like, a plan for me, and pushes me when something is really important and urgent. So yeah, the more, even just starting up a Substack, you might feel that sense of like obligation to an audience or something, and that is also a kind of pressure on the creative person that I don't think is so healthy for us.
Yeah, again, it goes back to that whole distraction, right? There's so many things we can do,
Pulling
but to
at you.
stay
Yeah.
with one and go deep, that's perhaps the challenge that I need to attempt to right now.
Yeah, me too. So if you can't find me on whatever soon, go to the Patreon because that's where my people are, and that's where we're gathering, and that's where I've decided to spend more energy, because there is a feeling of reciprocity there that I don't get from some of the other platforms.
Hmm.
And also, I'm sick and tired of seeing AI ads pop up on my podcasts. That's becoming, talk about aesthetic response. When I see that, I just, oh,
Yeah.
my stomach folds over. My heart cringes and it's repellent to me. So I want to try to put a stop to that while I still can. So, Ipek, thank you so much, and we'll talk to you down the road. Yeah.
Like a plan. Sounds like a plan. Hang in there.
All right, you hang in there too. Take it easy.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.